looks right to us, okay? Maybe show it to a few others. To us, it looks right. On the surface, it looks right. So face is just kind of on the face or on the surface without doing any formal testing or analysis. It just looks right, okay? We always do that. That's not a big problem to do that because it's not very, it's not real intrusive. You know, at a minimum, we'll always look for face validity. The same is true if you're trying to decide whether to use an existing instrument that's out there. Okay, if you're using something existing, you're going to examine it for face validity. In other words, does it look like it measures what you want to be measuring? Okay, does it look like these are the right items? And so that's something that you'll just briefly mention. It appears to have face validity. That's about all you can say about it. Okay, it's not something that requires something real formal. Content validity looks at the same kind of thing, but much more formally. With content validity, we are trying to make sure that these items cover the whole gamut of what we expect this latent trait to include, okay, and only that, be in a much more formal way. The way that you'll assess content validity is more formal. You can do it by making an argument that you have thoroughly surveyed the literature and these items tie to what you see in the literature. That's easy, okay? Not easy, but it should be done at a minimum, okay? Then there's things that are even more formal, which is basically having a panel of experts or a panel of users rate your items for you. That's if you really want to sell your instrument, you developed a new instrument, and you want to be able to convince others yours has a lot of validity. This is a good thing to do. What you would do is you typically take the items, you would give them to a group of experts. It may only be 3, okay? The more you do, the more evidence you have. You have these experts go through each of your items and rate the item itself, not answer the questionnaire as a user, not saying, I have this much self-esteem, but to rate that item as to how well they think it addresses the particular construct or latent variable you care about, okay? And so you might give them, say on a scale of 1 to 5, tell me how well you think this gets at the right construct. And you might have them at the same time make notes about items. They might at the same time make notes. I think the wording here could be clarified. If you change this wording this little bit, it will get at it better, or to be less misleading, that kind of thing. Okay, so you would do that kind of a thing. And you might also have them make suggestions as to areas of the construct you left out, okay, something else that you're missing. That would be quite a formal evaluation. And you would typically in a report just write up a summary of that. You might not provide in your report like a published paper all the data that came back from that. You might just briefly describe the process you went through in order to examine content validity. I had a panel of 5 experts in the field rate and evaluate all my items, and from that I eliminated 5 and revised 2 or 3. You just kind of give a summary of the process. But generally a publication isn't going to look for you to tell that detail. Now, a dissertation advisor, if your whole project is a scale validation project, then they might have you, put some of that data into an appendix or something like that. Okay, so there might be exceptions to that. So that's content validity. The whole point of content validity is to establish a case that the items cover the correct content. Okay, you imagine in your mind sometimes, or we do, that there's an infinite number of items out there that I could select from to put into my instrument. And I have sampled or pulled from those infinite number of items a good, appropriate, representative set of the things that I could have. It's not overbalanced where I've asked, like if it's about, like that instructor quality 9 items. If 7 of the items had to do with the instructor giving quick and appropriate feedback, okay, and my construct wasn't instructor giving good feedback, that wasn't what my construct was, it was more global about it, then it's not real representative. Maybe I've left out some other aspects of instructor quality, okay? So we want to make sure you can't necessarily get everything, but you want to be quite representative as possible in your items. And that's what you're trying to make a case of with content validity, okay? Can be quite subjective, but subjective based on some expert opinions. You may similarly, this is not as often done, give it to a group of users to use and have the users either sit down with you as they answer them and tell you what they think the question meant, what they think it was getting at, what they were thinking as they answered it. Do they think it's getting at this construct of self-esteem? Okay? It's often best to just sit with them one-on-one and go through. Do that with a group of potential users of the survey, people who would take it, or to have them respond on an exam, a paper in some way, have them comment for each item in some way. Do they think that it's getting at the idea of self-esteem as you've maybe given them a definition of it? Do they think it's getting at it? Or as they respond, are there other tangential things that are impacting how they answer that question too much? So that's something else that could be done. It's not done quite as often, but that's something that may be very good to do if you're worried about different users interpreting your questions different ways and you're not sure. You want to make sure they've interpreted it right. This process of gathering this content validity evidence, this is often done before you even pilot the items, okay? However, if it wasn't done before, it can be done after. There's no reason it can't be done after. One situation in which it might happen after is when you tested all your items and there's one or two, some that you're worried about. You think, these items don't correlate with the others as highly as they should. I'm concerned maybe that the users are interpreting this question differently than I meant because of the way my numbers came back or the way they responded to it. I'm going to, at that point, maybe do a panel of users and talk to a variety and say, what did you think that question meant? And in that case, I could gather some evidence for or against removing the item, okay, or revising the wording, that kind of thing. So it may be done after. There isn't an exact process to what has to be done first. You generally will look at face validity first. It is generally best to evaluate content validity if you can first, okay, before you even test the item. Just so you start off with the best possible items before you even send them out there and waste time sampling, surveying people. Those are typically done first. These other aspects of validity, criterion-related, construct-related, are tested statistically, so you really cannot test these other kinds of validity until you've gathered some data. So it makes sense to get your scale reliable first, gather data, make sure it's reliable first before we look at these other kinds of validity. You do that with these other kinds more with numbers. So it's just, you can't do it before you send it out. You have to have the data back. But the content validity could be done before or after, smarter to generally do. Okay? But again, we wouldn't necessarily do all of these. Criterion-related validity and construct validity are very easy to confuse with each other. Sometimes the same data you can collect will be one or the other depending on what you're doing with it and how you're interpreting it. There is a gray area where it's hard to know which category it fits in. It doesn't really matter. Okay? It doesn't really matter. It's just a label. In either case, it provides evidence that you're measuring the right thing. Criterion-related validity, when you do that, the most common things that are done is you're taking the results of this scale. So you've done it, you have scale scores for the sample you gave it to, and you're looking to see how it correlates with other measures, okay? It may be that you're measuring, you have a new test that's a new math test. It's a new 4th grade math test you have designed, okay? You also give the students the old math test that's been used in prior years. You look to see if they correlate with each other, okay? And this is looking for evidence of concurrent validity, means two things measured at the same time approximately. You want to see if they correlate with each other, okay? It might be that you have something like a scale that measures loneliness, okay? So you have this scale, that's a typical scale with these kind of Likert scale items, and you want to see whether that correlates with how many friends the person reported, which is something very much more of an observed measure. There could be some measurement error in that, but it's much more of a direct measure, I guess I should say, as opposed to indirect. And so you want to see, does that correlate, or you might be asking, does it predict how many friendships they end up with during the next year? That kind of a thing we often call criterion-related validity. We are just looking to see how this latent variable, this latent trait we've measured using our instrument, how those scores relate to or predict some other measurements. And these other measurements may be observed variables or may be other latent variables, okay? It doesn't imply one causes the other, it just looks to see the related. It's a little bit gray in looking at, comparing that with construct validity. With construct validity, we're always looking at relationships among latent variables, okay? And so I have a theory, and my theory is self-esteem should be highly correlated with depression, but a negative correlation. Should have a high negative correlation with depression, okay? But they shouldn't be perfect, right? And so I build these theories about how I think several latent variables should relate to each other, okay? And then when I look at that, I collect actual data, and I look to see whether it's true, whether it looked like it expected. You may expect two latent variables to be highly correlated, and we call that convergent validity, and you may expect them not to be correlated, and that's divergent validity. If you think two things are different and they're correlated at 0.85, there's something wrong, because either they really are the same thing, or you are measuring them the same way, and you're measuring one of them wrong. Okay, so that's kind of what this validity case is about. As far as how to do criterion-related validity and how to do construct validity, we will come back to that when we deal in our very last unit. Confirmatory factor analysis, we'll deal with some of that at least briefly. Okay, it's a little harder because you're trying to see whether two whole latent variables correlate with each other, and to do it right is a little harder. Okay, so for right now, just kind of know the different types here that exist. As part of your project, for this, you're supposed to write kind of a plan for measuring either content criterion related or construct validity. You don't have to do it. You just have to say, kind of, in a paragraph, explain what you would do. Explain what you would do, okay, in that particular case, okay? Content's the easiest one, probably, to do. You could talk about one of the others if you wish. Yes?
Taking you back to criterion validity, when you were using the fourth grade as an example, would that be like what's expected or what's within the fourth grade curriculum? Would that be like criterion?
No, it's not talking about criterion that way. It's talking about, does the score maybe on this fourth grade exam relate to other criteria in the way you would expect it to? Other criteria, like does this fourth grade exam, do I find students do better who have spent more hours in class? Or do I find that students do better on this fourth grade, which you should see, right? Or do students do better who have had more intensive remediation? You know, you start looking for what kind of groups here on this fourth grade exam should do better or worse, and do I see that? Do I see that with my actual data? If not, maybe I'm not measuring fourth grade math ability right. You know, if I find that more instructional time does not relate to higher scores, either there's something wrong with the instruction, right? Or there's something wrong with the test. It's measuring the instruction. So it gives you a place to start questioning what's the problem.
So what I just described.
The criterion, that would have more to do with content validity.
Right.
Like what should be included in your curriculum, is that all reflected by the test?
Yes.
That's content validity, correct. So a real easy example of content validity would be that I'm giving a math test, does it adequately cover the curriculum? Have I had several experts look at it and say they feel like you've adequately represented the curriculum here with your items? Yes.
When you're looking at criterion related validity,
Mhm.
would this be the kind of procedure that would allow you to build an equivalence table on the old test? A score of blank is equivalent on the new test to a score of blank. Like you'll see ACT, SAT, and make up the equivalence tables and all that.
Yeah, it's really quite a complex procedure to build score equivalences, score equating it's called, and it requires some really advanced psychometrics stuff beyond what you guys will get in this program. But it's something, it's kind of related to that in the sense that we do expect, right now with criterion-related validity, I'm just expecting the scores to correlate, okay? I'm just letting them to correlate. But to do what you're doing, we're expecting to do more than that. We're expected to get a very precise equivalence, which is sometimes not even doable, but sometimes can. Yeah, and they've done all that with roughly with the ACT and SAT. They can't do exactly because they're testing slightly different things, right? But they get rough equivalences. The time they do it most is maybe Form A and Form B of a test.
Yeah,
A standardized test, or we have a 2012 test we give everyone, and now we're going to make a 2013 form, and we want to make sure the scores are equivalent this year to last year, but we want to have mostly new questions, so it gets to be a little bit tricky. It's a complex thing. All right, other questions on this, on validity? It's kind of conceptually a little bit fuzzy probably, because it's hard. It's hard to categorize. Some things it's hard to know whether you consider construct or criterion related. There can be overlap, and it's really okay. It's okay because the point is we were trying to make a case for the fact that sensory measures what we say it measures. One case for that is having evaluated the content. Another way to make a case for it is by seeing whether it correlates to other things the way it's supposed to. That's just another way to make an argument that it's measuring the right thing. You never can convincingly prove validity. You cannot prove validity. You can only provide a case that strongly supports it. You can never prove it for sure, right? Okay. Any questions on that, on validity, besides that? Now, speaking of projects, that turned into my head. You guys feel free to email me. I put notes on the project. You are welcome. That is it's a project, it is not a test. So it is not something where you can't speak to other people or get other people to help you through. Just make sure that anything that's been done, like in SPSS or other software, if you have other software you like, is fine, okay? Just make sure that you've actually run that yourself. Even if you watch someone else do it, they tell you, and they make sure you run it yourself so you can do it. And the same with your write-up. If two of you work together, don't just turn me in one write-up. You each write it yourself in your own words, interpret things in your own words, okay? So that it's in your head, you learn something from it. Doesn't mean you can't. If I say design a way to study validity, doesn't mean you can't together come up with an idea and then both of you write it down in your own words. That's fine. Okay. So the other thing is you get stuck on something in SPSS and you can't figure it out with the resources you have, the videos. It can be helpful if you could send me a screenshot. Okay. I've also had people send me their actual data file and their output file so I could see exactly what had been going on. You can send those to me and I can see if I can track down what it is that's the problem, okay? So those things are helpful, okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you talking about under MLR project in the second part?
Yeah.
It says see directions below, but
They're not there yet for that one. Yeah, I haven't for the next unit. I haven't written yet the quiz or the project.
Okay.
So, but that project you won't even start on until after we have class again. So you got a long time. It's doing 6 weeks. You got a while. And the quiz I'll get there. I'll try to get there as soon as I can because I know some of you might get ahead on reading for that. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. All right. Okay. So that's it with validity. Qualtrics, I wanted to briefly address. Qualtrics, you are supposed to, all as students, have access to Qualtrics and be able to set up a Qualtrics account through WKU. This is the link for it. I think I left it open somewhere. That I can jump on there.
Is that the top?
Oh, there it is, you have it already open. So, you go there and I've already created an account. But this is the link that you go to on the paper. It'll let you do an account. You may have to do it with your WKU Shopper or whatever account, so that they know it's you.